Hello everyone and welcome to our online worship. It is June 26. The call to follow Jesus is a call to inner freedom, and by inner freedom I mean that we're not completely overtaken and hassled by conflict or anger or anxiety. It's a lifetime's commitment, and it seems like sometimes we do better at this than others. Today, Jesus teaches his students on how to deal with criticism, misunderstanding, and rejection. No, getting angry and all stressed up with no place to go isn't the best solution. How about learning a new way other than your first natural reaction? Jesus invites us to step out of the reactivity that the world around us enforces and choose another path, the path that we call following Christ. A reading from Luke chapter 9. When the days grew near for him, Jesus, to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent messengers ahead of him. And on their way they entered a village of Samaritans to make ready for him, but they did not receive him, because his face was set toward Jerusalem. And when his disciples James and John saw it, they said, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" But Jesus turned and rebuked them. Then they went on to another village. Quite a short text today, but as usual, these texts are packed with meaning. I've entitled this teaching, "Don't Let the Wrong People Derail You." This is a passage where we learn how Jesus responds to rejection and criticism, which he got often, by the way. Not everyone received him. And the disciples too are criticized and they are rejected, but they deal with things in an entirely different way. And of course, Jesus has a lesson for them. I think that you'll find that when we look at this text, we're more like the disciples than we are Jesus. The disciples are very reactive. They do the first thing that comes to mind, which often is not the most helpful thing, especially if we have people in our lives that are in some way, let's just say not encouraging or criticizing or misunderstanding. I mean, you know how it is when you're surrounded by people that are, actually you don't need to be surrounded. If you have one person in your life that's negative and complains all the time, that affects you, doesn't it? It has an effect on you. If you're around someone who's angry, or if you're around someone who's moody, or maybe there's somebody in the household that's moody and you never exactly know how they're going to be, that can be a real joy stealer. Someone who's argumentative, that can be a real joy stealer. So yeah, I mean, there's no way that we can live in this world and not be around people that in some way or another chafe us the wrong way or come against us. I mean, it's just not possible, is it? But here in this lesson, we have Jesus teaching James and John another way. The way that we respond to people it's very easy to get pulled down by different personalities. Very easy. If you work with someone that really is a bully, or they don't like you, or they're not good to you, that can really make you miserable. And we naturally react to the moods and behaviors of people around us. This is just a normal, natural reaction. I don't think we're ever going to not have that. But sometimes these natural first reactions or first responses can get us into a lot of trouble. unless we become aware really of what's happening, and then we can sort of change our response. So in our text today, we have Jesus' disciples, his students, and they are rejected. They're teaching, of course, they're on a mission. And they are rejected by a group of people called the Samaritans that they never really liked anyway. So the text doesn't give us much information, but we do know that their message, and of course they take it personally, they are rejected by this group of Samaritans. Now, there's a bad history between the ancient Jews and the ancient Samaritans. And this is the way it is with us today. When we have a history with someone that isn't good, if you have someone in your life that it really doesn't take much to set you off, if you have someone in your life that you have found at some point in the past they've been untrustworthy, for example, it's not going to take much for you to believe that they're not being truthful with you. I mean, this is the way it is with people. If you have someone in your life and you've had a bad encounter with them, or you've had a big argument with them, you're going to be on guard. This is just the way it is. And it doesn't take much for the disciples to get annoyed at this group of Samaritans who reject their teaching. And it's partly because they have a long history of animosity between the ancient Jews and the ancient Samaritans. So it doesn't really take much to get them off balance. Actually, that's kind of a good lesson for us. Just thought about that just now, you know. If there are people in our lives where we have a lot of history and it's not good history, it's good to be aware when we go into the conversation or into the meeting or whatever it is that we have to interface with this person, just to be aware of that. You know, we're going to be challenged in some way, so it's good to be prepared. So what happens is that they're rejected. James and John are rejected by the Samaritans, people that they don't like, and they immediately, they remember a story from what we call the Old Testament. They remember the story about Elijah calling down fire from heaven upon his enemies. And they get this idea, like, maybe, since Jesus is a miracle worker and everything, and since he's really connected with God, and since he's our teacher, maybe he could teach us how to use our power to call down fire from heaven to get rid of these Samaritans. So it's basically just revenge, right? They asked Jesus, would that be okay if they followed Elijah's example? Now, of course, obviously it's not okay. I mean, the whole idea of Jesus coming was to bring a new way of living. We all know the way of calling down fire from heaven, which is basically the way of getting even and the way of revenge. That's a natural thing to humanity, right? So when Jesus comes on the scene, he is bringing a completely different way of living that isn't reactionary. It's not our first reaction. Now, I know many of us would say, well, I'd never call down fire from heaven. I'd never do something like that. No, you wouldn't. You probably wouldn't. But there's other ways that you can get even with people. I think probably one of the most common ways is just simply the silent treatment. Right? It's a way of getting even, the silent treatment. Or gossip is a way of getting even with someone. So there's other ways that we can pay back. And this is really about payback. It's not about our ability to call down fire from heaven. It's about how do we respond when we're criticized? How do we respond when we're not appreciated? How do we respond when we're rejected? And James and John model for us in a very vivid way a common reaction. I want to get even with them. Jesus, can we call down fire from heaven? Of course he has obviously no interest in that at all. It's like, yeah, well, if Elijah did it, can't we? No. But by the way, that doesn't mean that Elijah was necessarily right. Elijah was a man of his time. So you'll notice in the New Testament and the Old Testament, there's sort of a progression of understanding of humanity and God. So the understanding of God is very different in Elijah's day as it would be in Jesus' day, for example, as it is today. Because although it's very, very slow, humanity does change over time. Evolve, I think is the word, right? So, no, Jesus doesn't want them to act that way. And in verse 55, the text says, Jesus turned and rebuked them. And that word rebuke is a very strong word in the original language. It would be like, absolutely not. That's not how we're doing things. In fact, by the way, Jesus really never expected to be accepted and welcomed by everyone. This was one of his teachings. This was one of the teachings that he taught the disciples early on. He gave them explicit instructions. When you're not accepted, when people don't appreciate you, when they don't like you, when they criticize you, shake the dust off your feet. Now, easier to say than do. We would say, treat it like water off a duck's back. Or there's one elder in a former parish said to me, consider the source, Glenda. Consider the source. So thought was kind of wise wisdom in a way. You know, who is it that's criticizing you? Who is it that is misunderstanding you? Consider the source. It might make a difference. In other words, yeah, you might be able to shake the dust off your feet. I mean, they might not have any insight or wisdom, in other words. So Jesus expected that this would happen. And he told James and he told John and Mary and all the disciples these things. But of course, to teach something and to say something is very different to practice it, isn't it? So when something actually happens to you, when someone does turn against you in some way, or someone isn't good to you in some way, that makes a big difference. And so these disciples had heard these teachings, but when it actually happens to them, when they are rejected, they want to get even. They want to pay back. They want to use violence, actually, which was a common thing in those days, as it is today. So Jesus sternly rebuked them, and it's like, you know, James and John, you have so much to learn. All the disciples, we have so much to learn, and us, the modern day disciples. These teachings are hard for us because Jesus always raises the bar. If you find the teaching of Jesus easy, you're probably misunderstanding it. Because when you look at these teachings, it's not something that you can do easily without a lot of attention, thought, awareness, self-awareness, so important in the Christian life and not easy to come by, really. Not easy to come by. So Jesus in anger, by the way, he said, you've heard it said, do not murder, but I say, anyone who is angry with a brother or sister is subject to judgment. He always raises the bar. So it's like, you think because you don't murder someone, you're okay? No. I'm dealing with attitudes here. I'm dealing with inner attitudes of anger. James and John have a lot of anger against these Samaritans, in other words. And it's not that anger's wrong. We've looked at this a lot in the past. It's not that anger's wrong. Of course there's helpful anger. There's good anger. There's necessary anger. But there's also destructive anger. And that destructive anger, that destructive piece, is the peace that Jesus wants us to be aware of when that surfaces in our lives. Now, it might surface in a very passive-aggressive way, because you might be the type of person that says, well, I never really feel angry. I never really get angry. Well, maybe you don't feel angry. Maybe there's other ways that you deal with anger, by ignoring someone, by giving somebody the cold shoulder, by being really stubborn and just doing what you want to do anyway. I mean, there's other ways that anger can come out sideways. You know, sometimes the blustery one with the big mouth is actually the most straightforward type of anger, and it's sometimes easier to deal with. Not always, of course. But anyway, so it's not that anger's bad. It's about learning how to recognize it and deal with it, and using that energy in a good way. If your anger leads to action, and if it leads to good changes, and if it makes relationships stronger, and if it sets a boundary that needs to be set, that's a good thing, right? All that anger, that angry energy is a good thing. But if it's just seething, and if it's resentful, and if it goes over old hurts, and if it's just general unforgiveness that weighs you down, obviously not helpful. And that's the kind of anger that Jesus speaks against. Oftentimes, anger of personal insult. Oftentimes it's just ego-based. You know, it's more about me than anything else, oftentimes. So James and John, it's like they get all caught up in this revenge. They get all caught up in wanting to prove that these other guys are wrong and wanting to get even. And here's the danger of this. It's like, James and John, weren't you supposed to be on an important mission with Jesus? Yeah, you were. Weren't you supposed to be going to Jerusalem with Jesus? Yeah, you were. So how come you're getting all caught? How come you've been derailed by the wrong people? You've forgotten your purpose. You've forgotten what you're supposed to be doing. What happened? How did you get embroiled in all of this drama? How did you get embroiled in all of this drama? It's not even your drama. You have something else to do. So the main thing isn't the main thing anymore for James and John. They've forgotten the main thing. If they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, they wouldn't be getting caught up in getting even, or criticizing, or revenge, or anything else. You see, there's a great line here in this text. It says, it's the first verse. When the days drew near for Jesus to be taken up, he set his face to Jerusalem. Now, we don't use this language, set his face. But it's a good line, because it's like Jesus is showing that he is undeterred in his purpose. When you know your purpose and when you're undeterred, you don't really have any patience nor time for the criticisms of anyone else. He set his face. He has a task to do. He knows what is his to do. He knows what his business is. He said, I'm about the Father's business. It's one of his lines. I'm about the Father's business. And that's a sense of purpose. He isn't going to be swayed here and there by the moods of people. He isn't going to be swayed by the needs of people. That's another thing. He didn't follow the needs of people. It's a whole other teaching, but he didn't feel obliged or obligated to say yes to everyone. Why? Because he's tuning in to a deeper call, a deeper voice. He's not swayed. He's determined. I'm about the Father's business, meaning I want to please God in all of these things. I want to please God in all of these things. My words, my actions, my attitude. It's not so much important what we choose to do in life, it's how we do it. You know, it's not the vocation or how we spend our time so much, it's how we're doing it. You know, it's like if I'm a parent and I'm trying to navigate through all the choices and the opportunities of raising young children. You know, I want to do it in such a way that I believe that I'm being faithful to God. Or if I'm running a business, I want to run my business and treat my staff and my workers in a way that I believe is pleasing to God. No matter what I'm doing in my life, how I interact with my neighbours, particularly the ones that aren't particularly nice, or the expectations of extended family. Or might not even be extended family. You might have some friends that have expectations. You really don't want to do that. You don't really even think it's yours to do, but you feel obligated. That would be, no, that's not about faithfulness. Faithfulness to God is to be able to say yes when you need to say yes and no when you need to say no. Remember Jesus saying, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. In other words, have a sure sense of what is yours to do and what isn't yours to do. Save you an awful lot of trouble and an awful lot of heartache. Once we discern what faithfulness looks like, we're a lot less likely to get off track. Once we know what our call is, our purpose, we're a lot less likely to become reactive like James and John. James and John are reactive because they've lost their sense of mission and purpose. If they would get back to doing what they were supposed to be doing, they wouldn't be spending their time thinking about how to persuade Jesus to teach them how to call down fire from heaven, right? It doesn't work that way. We can only think of one thing at a time. Any kind of payback is always reactive, always, when you think about it. Rather than Jesus' way, which is really a proactive way of living in the world. He'd say, shake the dust off your feet. Don't let the wrong people derail you. Move on. Don't let others define you. God defines you. Other people don't define you. We have important things to do, Jesus would say. What about the work of the kingdom? Right? We're about God's work here. Don't waste your time, James and John, over there with these people. Shake the dust off your feet. Don't waste your energy. Don't waste your energy defending and proving and blaming and resenting and hating and disliking. Move on. Shake the dust off your feet. Get on with better things. There's a better way to spend a life. There's a better way to spend time. I think in some way Jesus is reminding James and John that they're not victims. I think he's empowering them to live another way, to give them a new way, to not be held and bound by their reactions. And I think that's a great reminder for us. Don't let the wrong people derail you. Yes, there's going to be people in our life that will try and, for whatever reason, usually dysfunction, get us off track. But, you know, pay attention, recognize it. You know, once you recognize it, you're halfway there. Because when you recognize it and you see what's happening, that you've lost focus and that you've lost track, it's an opportunity to get back on track. Remember the old line, keep the faith. Yeah, keep the faith. What does that mean? Keep the trust. Keep trusting. Get back on track. So there's the prayer. There's the heart cry. When the wrong people derail us for whatever reason, God help us to recognize it and help us fix our eyes on you. Amen.
Thank you.